Usually at this time, I review all of last year's Disney movies worst to best, but movies weren't really a thing in 2020. Well, they were, but I made my rules that I only review theatrical releases, so that means I was free from torturing myself watching all of these new movies on Disney+. To make up for this loss in content, I will be going back over the few films I did watch last year, as well as analyze some of the other projects the company started and the new content they announced. This is a look back at Disney in 2020. Let me start off by talking about Onward, the only movie I got to see in theaters before that stopped being a thing. I would spend more time talking about it now, but I really can't remember much about it, besides the stuff I already covered in my full review for the movie. It suffers from being another one of Pixar's movies that seems to have only been created to show off these emotional scenes, something I talked about when I reviewed Soul. The rest of the movie is dull with forgettable characters, an uninspired background, and overall design. Solid 3 out of 10. The next Disney movie I saw last year was Mulan. Let me be clear that I saw this movie when it was released for free on Disney+, because it certainly wasn't worth the $30. Disney usually ruins their characters and their remakes by making them total idiots, but they strip Mulan of her personality by making her too perfect. You can't learn anything or be inspired by a character who doesn't deal with any challenges or face any consequences for their actions. This is the biggest thing I wanted to emphasize in my full review for this movie. If a character can be too flawed, then another one can be too perfect. This has become the Disney remake I want to rewatch the least. Solid 2 out of 10. And the final Disney film I saw in 2020 was Soul. The first time I watched and then reviewed this film, I was prompted to rant about the fact that Disney and Pixar's creative integrity is practically dead. They keep trying to say that they're the most inspirational company, but they don't take creative risks like they used to or take stands on important subjects. It really frustrates me because in between watching these new movies, I'm going back and watching movies like Hunchback or Ratatouille, things that have so much more depth because they actually dive into the minds of these characters and the world they've built around them. Soul does neither of those things. I mean, what do we really know about Joe? He likes music. That's really the only thing we have to go off of. They hardly develop any sort of backstory for him. He's just a blank slate for audiences to extend their own stories onto. I can't get into the conflict of this movie, and I don't care what happens to him because he hardly has a personality. He just reacts to things. He's a catalyst for audiences to look into their own lives and think about their own dreams. This is what again got me so frustrated when I first talked about this movie. The fact that Disney can no longer make interesting characters because they just want to make movies that show fun adventures without adding real depth or conflict. Or they just want to remake movies that strip the originals of their depth and conflict, resulting in a multitude of films that are forgettable and insulting. They also kept making this joke, which just rubbed me so the wrong way, where 22 continues to mention how these different historical figures essentially bullied her. Maybe I'm sensitive, but I'm offended on behalf of these people. It's insulting to call someone out like Mother Teresa, especially a whiny character who has done nothing for society the way these famous people have. I'll of course admit the good things though. The animation looked great. I feel like they could have done more to capture the essence of New York instead of just making this feel like a normal city background, but it's very realistic. I also liked the visuals every time Joe went into the zone, but it was very much just a scene from Ratatouille. There were things of course I liked about this movie, but it just didn't stick with me the way Pixar films like Ratatouille or Finding Nemo did because it didn't have much of an identity. They wanted it to be inspirational, titling the movie Soul, talking about life and death, but you can't get deep into these concepts when the audience doesn't know anything about the main character besides what he likes. His only goal in this movie was to land this one gig, then he got it. Now what? He helped 22 find her purpose. Now what? These characters are so underdeveloped I couldn't tell you. There was a lot of potential here, but Soul did nothing for me. Solid 4 out of 10. Maybe more of a 5, but I don't think I'd watch it again. I was excited for the second season of The Mandalorian, mainly because there wasn't a lot of other Disney content for me to get excited about. I certainly wasn't counting down the days until any of these came out. I liked the first season well enough. I don't think it's as groundbreaking or flawless as people worshipped it to be, but I like the change of pace. It's a simple story, and I enjoy having the time to explore the galaxy in this new way. The characters are interesting and have good chemistry. The action is pretty good, just a little formulaic each episode. However, I definitely feel the second season has already started to feel the pressures of being called the greatest thing ever. I also think the second season has developed the same problem Marvel has, although it's certainly not as bad, where any content not tied to the overarching storyline is forgettable. They don't hold up next to these other episodes with a villain or these episodes that introduce these different characters. They're still entertaining, a real masterpiece compared to some of Disney's other content from this year, but in the back of my mind I'm just thinking about getting back to these important moments that move the story forward. I think they need to work on bridging that gap better. These standalone episodes need to be able to stand stronger. Again, still entertaining, but they could be better. And maybe if they didn't spend so much time shoving Baby Yoda in our faces, they could do that. Also, Baby Yoda, the child, Grogu. I feel like I'll switch between all three names going forward. I knew whatever name they decided on would sound weird since I've known him as something else for so long, but I do think the name Grogu is fine. It's as simple and unique as Yoda. It again just sounds weird because I've been calling him everything but that for so long. And I'm not that familiar with these returning characters, but I think they made the jump to live action well. Everyone except Boba Fett. An unpopular opinion, but I don't think he deserves to be focused on. I think he served his time well in the original trilogy and wasn't meant for anything more. It'd be like developing a full story and show for Admiral Akbar. I know they could do it, but I don't think it's meant to be done. And I know there's hundreds of stories in the extended universe that share their backstory and keep their adventures going, but I believe when something ends, it should stay that way. Some characters are just meant to stay side characters. They serve their purpose best when they work with someone else. Moving on from media to merchandise, because that's what Disney is really all about. I've talked before at how bananas people get whenever something limited edition is released. 2020's exclusive monthly collection was called Minnie's Main Attraction. After just a few months of letting people directly try to purchase it on the release dates, Disney implemented a lottery system called Merch Pass instead. I won't debate which method is fairer because life isn't fair. These are not essentials, people. I can't believe how many posts I had to skip past on those release days. So many people cursing Disney's name because they weren't granted the right to purchase something. How ridiculous a concept is that? People's priorities were all out of whack last year, and these product drops certainly didn't help. In December, Disney's Investor Day came around, which I know is a day to stay off the internet for fear of drowning in announcements of all of the company's future projects. There was a predominant focus on streaming content because Disney Plus is their big moneymaker nowadays. I definitely fear for the future because once Disney knows something makes them money, they will only focus on that one thing and totally drain the life out of it. I'd go through all of the announcements now, but it's just a lot of mindless sequels and remakes. Things that didn't need to be redone, but are anyway because the marketing for these stories is too strong. Practically everything gets a sequel nowadays. Except this. This doesn't get a reboot because it wasn't willing to follow the predetermined PC formula Disney had planned for it. This was one show that lent itself to a reboot well. Stack this loss next to Edgar Wright's script for Ant-Man. Probably the most horrific Disney side of 2020 was seeing this. Imagine the company that made Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs the first full-length animated film now promoting the latest season of The Kardashians. Thankfully, a lot of people agree that this was disgusting, but Disney doesn't care. They're too busy counting the money they made from this deal. That's the problem with owning all of this junk. So many of these announcements are totally irrelevant to the brand Disney had established all those years ago. Every time this day comes around, I'm reminded that Disney is not the company they used to be. But then something came along, or rather someone, and I learned how to hope again. I wanted to save the best moment of 2020 for last. Actually, not just of 2020, but probably one of my favorite Disney moments in the past 10 years. I haven't felt this joy from Disney in a long time, and it's all thanks to our Lord and Savior, Mark Hamill. I worship the ground this man walks on, and I love him more than I love myself. If anyone could turn such a garbage year around, it was him. I didn't think they'd pull it off, but they did. Even down to the last moment, I was doubting that they could give this scene the attention it deserves, but it was more than I could have ever hoped for. There's a lot of pain I still need to heal from The Rise of Skywalker, but I'm resting easy with this scene now in my life. It really frustrates and confuses me every time when my favorite and least favorite thing from last year contrast each other this much. Truly though, I can sit through these live-action remakes and these other forgettable films if it means getting moments like this. Let's just hope Disney can keep it up in the new year.